So Camilla Parker Bowles is the Queen Consort of England, wearing a crown and living in a palace, and yet her own son was physically turned away at the gates of Windsor Castle on her husband's watch, and the man who gave that order was Prince William. That's where this story starts, and honestly, it gets so much more layered from there because this wasn't a scheduling conflict or a security mix-up. This was a deliberate, calculated decision by the future king to draw a line in the sand about who belongs inside the royal circle and who doesn't. And the person on the other side of that line was his father's wife. If you haven't already, hit subscribe and join us here at Crown Watch because we're tracking all of this as it unfolds. So let's go straight to the night everything boiled over, which was supposed to be this magnificent evening of royal elegance at Windsor Castle, the Windsor Charity Gala, dignitaries everywhere, aristocrats, global benefactors, the whole polished production designed to show the monarchy at its most unified and majestic. And Camilla had been working behind the scenes to make sure her eldest son, Tom Parker Bowles, would be included among the honored guests. Now, Tom Parker Bowles isn't some stranger to royal circles. He's a well-known food critic and author who spent years attending family events, just never in an official capacity, never formally acknowledged as part of the royal apparatus. And Camilla, now that she's Queen Consort, felt it was time to bring her children into the fold properly, starting with Tom's participation in high-profile royal occasions. She made her request. She pushed for it. She even got King Charles involved, thinking her husband would persuade his son to see reason. But William saw the situation completely differently. This wasn't a private dinner or an informal family gathering. This was a regal occasion steeped in history and symbolism, and William believes symbolism matters more than almost anything else. He understands that every photograph, every seating arrangement, every name on a guest list sends a signal about who the monarchy values and who it does not. So when the guest list was finalized, Tom Parker Bowles' name was not on it, and Camilla was stunned. She pleaded, she negotiated, she went through every channel available to her, and William simply refused to bend. Then came the actual night of the gala. Guests in sparkling gowns and tailored suits arriving at Windsor's gates, cameras flashing, limousines gliding through, and Tom Parker Bowles reportedly attempted to enter with his mother's entourage. What happened next is the part that's hard to imagine happening to the son of a queen. Security authorities, acting on clear instructions, denied him access. Eyewitnesses described this moment of genuine awkwardness, Tom's visible shock, the silence, the humiliation of being softly turned away, while everyone else swept past him into the castle. Inside, Camilla had to stand there smiling for the cameras, waving, performing the role of gracious consort, while absorbing what was probably the most personal and public insult she's received since becoming queen. People who were there said her jaw was clenched, her hands trembling slightly. For the first time in years, she looked vulnerable rather than majestic. This wasn't a subtle snub handle discreetly behind closed doors. This was a public slap delivered at the gates of Windsor Castle, with the whole world watching. And when the gala ended and the last guest had left and the cameras stopped flashing, that's when Camilla reportedly fell apart. Sources who witnessed the aftermath described her dropping into a chair inside those majestic walls, her composure completely shattered, teary-eyed, deeply humiliated, not just as queen, but as a mother. One staff member later said it was the look in her eyes that stayed with him, not anger at first, but complete disbelief, like she genuinely couldn't believe William had actually done it. But he did. He gave the order. Her son was denied admittance to a royal gathering she had personally helped organize, and in doing that, William built a harsh and unbreakable barrier between Camilla's family and the monarchy's inner circle. Camilla reportedly said to her aides afterward, "I thought we were past this, I thought we were family." And that line right there tells you everything about the gap between what she believed her position meant and what William was willing to allow. She had assumed the title of Queen Consort would finally grant her children the acceptance she had spent decades hoping for, but William's actions proved that titles and tiaras do not rewrite history. Now, to understand why William took such a hard line, you have to go back not just to his royal training, but to the emotional foundation of his entire identity, and that foundation is his mother, Princess Diana. Her presence may have vanished from the world in 1997, but for William, she never left. Her spirit, her values, her wounds have stayed with him every single day since. More than any royal title, Diana shaped the future King of England. William wasn't just the heir to the throne from birth, he was also the son of a woman adored by millions who had been betrayed by the very institution he was supposed to one day lead. As a kid, he watched his mother get consumed by the cold machinery of royalty. He watched the media tear her apart. He overheard whispers about Camilla, about betrayal, about secrets concealed behind palace doors. Then she was gone in one horrible night, and that kind of loss etches something permanent into a person. For William, it created a quiet but absolutely unwavering mission. Never let what happened to Diana happen again. Not to his wife, not to his kids, not on his watch, and if he could prevent it, he would not submit to the version of monarchy that destroyed her. He would honor his mother's legacy not through public outrage, but through measured, ethical, deliberate decisions. So where does Queen Camilla fit into that emotional map? No matter how hard the royal press worked to rehabilitate her image, William would never forget who she had been in his mother's story. She wasn't simply Charles's longtime companion. She was the woman who stood between his mother and the marriage that was supposed to anchor the kingdom. Yes, William has shown signs of acceptance over the years. He's exchanged smiles, handshakes, pleasant mentions, and speeches. He even supported Camilla's elevation to Queen Consort following Elizabeth II's death. But insiders say those gestures were always diplomatic armor rather than genuine affection. Behind the scenes, his relationship with Camilla has been chilly, cautious, quietly strained. He considered her presence essential to his father's happiness, but never as a foundation of the monarchy's future. And as Camilla's role grew, the line between tolerance and trust became sharper and clearer. She progressed from Duchess of Cornwall to Queen Consort. Her name started appearing in headlines alongside Elizabeth's and even Diana's. That was the line William couldn't let her cross. Diana wasn't just a mother, she was a legacy. And in William's view, that legacy was continuously being rewritten, sanitized, softened to make room for the woman who had caused her so much pain. So Camilla's push to include her family in royal functions, starting with Tom Parker Bowles, was never just a logistical issue to him. It was deeply personal, allowing Camilla's son to appear alongside blood royals in portraits, on guest lists, at charity galas, felt like the final erasure of Diana's sacrifice. William reportedly said it wasn't about Tom personally, it was about what Tom represented, a quiet attempt to legitimize a lineage that in William's view simply did not belong. And here's the thing about how William operates. Multiple palace sources said his expression barely changed when he declined Camilla's request. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't debate, he just said no. When questioned, he reportedly said, "This isn't about the guest list, it's about what we stand for." That has always been William's compass, not personal vendettas, but values. He sees himself as both the crown's future guardian and the ultimate steward of his mother's dignity. So when he closed the gates of Windsor on Camilla's son, it wasn't an act of cruelty. It was a demonstration of conviction, an unspoken message for Camilla and for the world that Diana still matters, her legacy is still alive, and no one, not even a queen, will be able to rewrite that truth for as long as William lives. But what happened next is where the story moves from a single dramatic night into something much more systematic. Because if the Windsor Gala was a public slap, what followed was a cold and deliberate blow aimed even deeper into Queen Camilla's personal world. Only weeks after Camilla was left reeling from the humiliation of her son being turned away, Prince William's administration made another decision. This time it wasn't about guest lists or charity appearances, it was about money, legacy, and power, and it involved someone even closer to Camilla than the media typically realizes, her sister Annabel Elliot. For nearly 2 decades, Annabel had quietly played an important role within the royal household. She's a well-known interior designer who oversaw the refurbishment and aesthetic modernization of numerous properties inside the Duchy of Cornwall, the vast royal estate traditionally controlled by the heir to the throne.
She wears a crown that took nearly 3 decades to earn, and yet headlines keep insisting she's already lost it. That's the strange contradiction, sitting at the center of the Camilla story right now. On one hand, a woman formally crowned queen at Westminster Abbey in May of 2023, standing beside King Charles III in front of the entire world. On the other hand, a steady stream of viral claims insisting she's been quietly expelled from the family that just anointed her. So which is it? To answer that honestly, you have to set aside the sensational headline for a moment and look at what has actually been reported, documented, and said on the record over more than 20 years, because the real story of Camilla's place inside the House of Windsor, and specifically her complicated relationship with Prince William, is layered enough without anyone needing to invent scenes that never happened. Start with the man at the center of this supposed rift. William's relationship with Camilla cannot be understood apart from his relationship with his mother. Princess Diana died in Paris in August of 1997, when William was 15 years old, and biographers who have spent years studying him, Penny Junor, Sally Bedell Smith, Angela Levin among them, all describe a boy who absorbed his mother's pain about the Camilla affair long before he was old enough to process it. Diana spoke publicly, most famously in her 1995 BBC Panorama interview, about the strain 3 people in a marriage creates. William grew up inside that fallout. So when people ask why William's feelings toward Camilla have always seemed more guarded than his father's, the honest answer isn't mystery or scandal. It's grief, and it's loyalty to a mother who isn't here to advocate for herself anymore. That said, the documented history does not support the idea that William has spent the last 2 decades building walls against Camilla. It supports something messier and more human, a slow, uneven thaw. When Charles and Camilla married in April of 2005 at Windsor Guildhall, both William and Harry attended, and both stood beside their father at the wedding blessing at St. George's Chapel. Harry, in fact, gave a warmly received speech at the reception praising Camilla's steadiness in his father's life. Royal correspondents covering that day, including Robert Jobson, who has spent decades reporting on the family for outlets like the Evening Standard and later authoring books such as Our King, described the son's presence as a turning point, not because resentment vanished overnight, but because it signaled the boys were willing to publicly accept the marriage, whatever they privately felt. From there, the relationship developed the way most complicated family relationships do, gradually, with visible effort, and without a single dramatic reversal. Camilla spent years working to rehabilitate an image that had been, by her own later admission in interviews, deeply damaged by public perception of the affair. Historian and biographer Robert Lacey, who has written extensively about the modern monarchy, including Battle of Brothers, has described Camilla's decades-long project as one of patient, deliberate goodwill building rather than dramatic reinvention. She took on charitable causes tied to domestic abuse survivors and literacy. She showed up, year after year, to the unglamorous corners of royal duty, and slowly, the same public that once vilified her began to come around. The clearest, most significant marker of that shift didn't come from William at all. It came from Queen Elizabeth II herself. In February of 2022, marking her Platinum Jubilee, the Queen released a written statement carrying more constitutional weight than almost anything she'd said in years. She wrote that it was her sincere wish that when Charles became king, Camilla would be known as Queen Consort. That single sentence ended nearly 2 decades of ambiguity about what title Camilla would eventually hold, because until that moment, there had been real uncertainty, even suggestions that she might instead be called Princess Consort. Robert Lacey, commenting publicly at the time, called it the moment that formally brought Camilla into what royal insiders call simply the firm. Charles responded with a statement expressing that he and Camilla were, in his words, deeply conscious of the honor his mother's wish represented. That moment matters enormously to this story, because it came directly from the one person whose word inside that family carried absolute final authority. If William had truly been waging some quiet campaign to push Camilla toward the exits, The Jubilee statement would have been the moment to signal resistance. There's no documented indication that he did. Instead, when Elizabeth II died in September of 2022, and again at the coronation in May of 2023, William played a visible, ceremonial role, affirming continuity, not conflict. At that coronation, William knelt before his father and performed the homage of royal blood, pledging his loyalty as the king's liege man of life and limb, an act carried live around the world, and about as far from a family expelling its queen as a ceremony can get. Now, what about Camilla's own children, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopez, since so much of the viral rumor mill centers on them specifically? Here the facts are actually simpler and less dramatic than the fabricated version suggests. Tom Parker Bowles is a well-known British food writer and critic, the author of several cookbooks, and a familiar face on British food television. Laura Lopez has kept an even lower public profile, working in the art world. Neither has ever held the position of a working royal, meaning neither carries out official royal engagements, receives royal funding for public duties, or appears on the traditional balcony line for state occasions. But that is not evidence of a punishment. It reflects a choice that predates any of the recent rumors. One Tom Parker Bowles himself has addressed directly in interviews over the years, describing his preference for building an independent career away from the constraints of official royal life rather than being pulled into it. This distinction matters because so much of the fabricated content circulating online conflates never made an official working royal with banned or cast out, as if there's some documented incident of exclusion at a specific event. There isn't. No credible outlet. Not the Times, not the Telegraph, not the Daily Mail's royal desk, not Katie Nicholl, who's reporting on the younger generation of royals for Vanity Fair, and in her book, The New Royals, is considered some of the most well-sourced coverage of this family, has ever reported an incident of Tom Parker Bowles being turned away from a royal event by William's order. It simply isn't part of the documented record. However dramatic that story sounds when narrated with royal string music underneath it. So where does the real tension actually live? If it isn't in some cinematic gala confrontation, it lives in something quieter and honestly more believable. The ordinary, well-documented friction of blended families adjusting to loss, remarriage, and decades of public scrutiny. Sally Bedell Smith's biography of Charles describes years of frost between William and Camilla in the early 2000s, a period when William reportedly kept his interactions with her formal and limited. Angela Levin's reporting on William describes a young man who took years to warm to his stepmother, largely because doing so felt, to him, like a betrayal of his mother's memory. These are real, sourced observations from journalists who've spent careers covering this family, not manufactured drama, but recognizable human reluctance. And, crucially, that reluctance evolved. By the time of Elizabeth II's funeral in September 2022, footage widely broadcast around the world showed William and Camilla standing together through days of solemn ceremony, functioning as a unified family under enormous public pressure. At the coronation 8 months later, Camilla was crowned queen in a ceremony William took part in as a central figure, not an absent or dissenting one. If there is a real headline buried in all of this, it isn't that William expelled Camilla from the royal family. It's that two people who started from a place of real, understandable pain built something more functional over 20 years than anyone watching from the outside in 2005 might have predicted. That doesn't mean every wrinkle has been smoothed out. Royal reporters who cover the family closely, including Jobson and Nicholl, have both suggested in various pieces over the years that William's relationship with Camilla remains more formal, more measured, than his relationship with, say, his own grandmother was. There's a difference between genuine warmth and diplomatic cordiality, and multiple sources close to the family have suggested William's feelings toward Camilla likely sits somewhere in that more cautious territory even now, but more formal than some family members and orchestrated a public expulsion, are two entirely different stories, and only one of them is supported by anything that's actually been reported. It's worth asking, too, why stories like the fabricated gala scene spread so easily in the first place. Part of it is simply the emotional logic of the Diana story itself. Audiences who grew up watching Diana's public suffering are primed to want William to be her avenger, delivering some symbolic justice against the woman associated with her pain. That's a satisfying narrative. It's just not one grounded in the documented behavior of a 15-year-old boy who grew into a 40-something future king, performing acts of formal loyalty to his father's marriage on the biggest ceremonial stage in the country. The truth doesn't offer the same tidy catharsis. It offers something slower and more complicated. A family that has spent decades negotiating grief, image, duty, and forgiveness in full public view, imperfectly, and mostly without the theatrics social media likes to assign to it. What actually emerges from the reliable record is a portrait far more interesting than manufactured palace intrigue. It's the portrait of an institution that survived one of its most painful chapters, not through banishment or dramatic confrontation, but through the unglamorous work of time. Camilla spent 2 decades earning back public trust, one charity visit at a time. William spent those same years carrying his mother's memory while learning to share a family with the woman who was once cast as the villain in that story. And somewhere in between the Jubilee statement, the Coronation homage, and the quiet, ordinary moments the press never captures, something like an actual family took shape. Not without scars, not without distance, but real and still standing. That's not the story the algorithm rewards, but it's the one that actually happened, and it deserves to be told with the same care the people living it have shown each other.